If you've ever worked with me in session, especially around topics like betrayal or conflict in intimacy, you've probably heard me say something like, my mentor, Dr. Mike Sytsma says, or here's what Dr. Mike would say. You see, Dr. Mike Sytsma is a licensed professional counselor, a certified sex therapist, researcher, author, and educator. He's also been a mentor and friend to me and my husband for years. He has spent decades sitting in rooms with the kinds of fractures that would shake your sense of reality. Betrayal, infidelity, addiction, some of the most complex, painful conflicts a marriage can face. The kind of moments that may make you ask, could we ever come back from this? So I decided I wanted to invite him onto the podcast and ask, after 30 plus years of working with some of these complex cases with couples, what does it really take to heal conflict? And he didn't just give me a list of techniques. He gave me 2 postures, and I knew immediately they're necessary, not just in marriage, but at the Christmas table, in our friendships, online, in our workplaces, and yes, even in our relationship with institutions, including the military. In this episode, you'll hear us start with a conversation around addiction and affair recovery. But as it often does with Dr. Mike, it grows into something bigger. How can we become the kind of people who can face conflict without losing ourselves? And these 2 postures that he brings to us can transform not just a marriage, but how we move through the world. This episode is mostly a real unscripted conversation between 2 clinicians who care deeply about people. We're going to zoom in on couples, but also zoom out to family systems and then further out to culture and to leadership. I started by asking Dr. Mike how he got into this work in the first place. You're listening to Restored, stories of conflict, healing, and peace. I am so excited to have back again my friend, my colleague, my mentor. If you've worked with me in sessions before, especially on hot topics in your relationship, affair recovery, you have heard me mention Dr. Mike Sytsma. I've probably sent you material on his work. I've learned so much from him. And if you're new to this podcast, I will have in the show notes links to previous conversations that I've had with Dr. Mike. But Dr. Mike, thank you so much for joining me again. I think if I continue to have you back, you're going to be like a co-host at this point. So thank you for coming back.
I'm always, truly huge honored. And I love the podcasts with you. They're always so much fun.
Oh, thank you. And we've covered so many different kinds of topics. Mm-hmm. We're going to be really specific today. But you have an incredible background as a clinician, working with couples and individuals and families, but also you're an author. You've written books. You've done so much research. You've done articles. You've taught in universities on so many things, a lot in the area of sex therapy and incongruence in sexual intimacy. I know you came out with a book in a previous interview that I did with you and Shanti Feldhan, another one of my favorite authors, on intimacy. And so for those who have not heard of you and read some of your books, if you can share a little bit of your story, what you're passionate about, how you got into working with couples in the first place.
Yeah, I feel like the direction of my life from early on was to help people where they were hurting. And so I was working to be a physician, and long story, but that shifted into doing ministry work. I met with a bunch of ministers and they said, we don't understand addiction. So I took a course in addictions, chemical addictions, didn't know an addict that I knew of at the time. These people took me on and shared with me what it was like to be an addict, what it was like to live with addicts, and totally changed the way I view caring for people. And that set me on a different direction. I spent a time in assisting in the starting of 2 different churches that have been fairly successful. But as people come to Pastor Mike, I didn't really know how to help them. So I kept going back and getting ongoing training. Worked inpatient for about 5 years, directing a program there. really learning how to fine tune those skills, and then fell in love with marriage work and seeing how that exposes the rawest, sometimes, parts of us, gives us the greatest opportunity to face ourselves as our spouse looks at us and says, I don't like this in you. This is not healthy. And we can either work to attack and change them, or we can take ownership to find our own agency and not play the victim, and truly grow and be a better person, somebody that we're proud of. So learning to step in and do therapy with individuals in the context of relationship with the goal of helping them to be their best self, helping them to grow to from a faith perspective, to be discipled, from a psych perspective, to be self-actualized or self-differentiated, helping them to be somebody that they can look back and go, I'm proud of who I've become. And I love doing that work. I love watching how it happens. So I spend 20, 25 hours a week doing predominantly marital therapy, working with some sex addicts, some alcoholics still, and some high conflict marriages, and then some that just are like, we want more out of our marriage, and those are always fun. Plus, professor at 5 different grad schools that I step into and teach. So I try to keep it busy so I don't get into too much trouble.
5 is a lot of universities to be part of. I've interviewed you several times. I think this is probably the 5th or 6th time I've had you on, from just over the last decade, probably. I I don't know if I've heard that part about you working with addictions in the beginning. That's actually how I started too. I did 4 years of working with women out of prison, dealing with substance abuse. And I would say the same thing. Like, there's something about that just launched my compassion, launched a new understanding of what it means to work on yourself and to grow and heal. In fact, I was just talking with someone in a session earlier this week about there's that 12-step program not only taught me so much about other people, taught me about myself. Um, and I still, to this day, look at those who have had to walk with addiction and journey through that and go through the process of recovery and relapse, and just the amazing strength and resilience it takes to keep looking at yourself every day, to acknowledge your limits of what you can handle and what you can do on your own, the ability to ask for help, the ability to recognize that something outside of you has to be part of that answer, whether it's community, God, whatever. That process of making amends and then circling back through the whole thing over and over and over again. To this day, I look at those who are in the process of that addictions work as so much stronger, so much more self-aware, and so much more humble
Right.
than the rest of us.
Right. A lot of what we're going to talk about today, is rooted in what I learned. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent sitting in AA meetings and 12-step meetings, NACA, OA, and just learning from people in recovery. 2 weeks ago, a new client came in and sat down, and they started to introduce themselves. And about 20 minutes in, I looked at him and I said, so how long you been in recovery? And he stopped and he looked at me and he chuckled. He says, you saw that, huh? I says, dude, it's all over you. He said, 14 years. He said, how did you see it? It's your stance to the world. You the first 3 steps, as you know, are all about surrender, about brokenness, about I can't, he can. How do I let him? And I said, everything about what you're talking about exhibits that spirit. That only happens really for somebody who has wrestled with himself at that level. And it's not the first 3 years of recovery. It's 5 to 7 years before you really start to go, oh, I'm beginning to get it. And people at that level have taught me so much. And yeah, it's going to permeate what we're going to talk about today. Those that have been in recovery for quite a while will hear the messages of recovery all through it.
We are all in relationships somehow, and conflict plays a role in our understanding of ourselves. As you said in the beginning, to know what to do with that and how we approach the world. And conflict is part of that journey. And so as I was thinking about this podcast and this season, You are a mentor of mine. You have worked with some of the most challenging topics for couples. I know you've just described so many different categories and issues that you've worked with individuals and families. But what I know you really well with is working with affair recovery, those who've been through betrayal. And you kind of have a system, you kind of have a way of working with people to journey with them through these different stages of healing, that has really helped couples navigate a topic that is so complex and so hurtful. And most people would either go through that topic or think of that topic as something that you cannot recover from. And so I wanted to bring you on to talk through your years of working with couples on some of these big topics, and what you've learned and the wisdom that maybe you could share on, after all of that time working with so many different kinds of couples, so many different kinds of complex issues, what's the common thread that you would say is the most important that helps people work through things that they think that they cannot recover from? So I think to kind of start with, what would you say? I mean, that would be for me, maybe for others listening, betrayal, affair recovery would definitely be one of those. Abuse maybe would be one of those topics
Mhm.
that's really hard to recover from. Would you say that that is some of the most complex topics, or would you say that there's others that you would look back on and say are just the really tough ones to move through and heal
No,
from?
no, I think you're totally right. And let me back up a little bit. Um, I, I counted up, it's been a few months now, but 70% of my caseload at the time was post-affair, was affair recovery work. I love doing that kind of work because all of what I've trained in comes together. But I also love when, that you bring me on to talk about it, because you're right. So much of the narrative is, if that happens, we cannot recover. If that happens, we shouldn't recover.
Mm.
That is an irreparable kind of a breach. And that is so not true. Yes, sometimes it can't, because what we're going to talk about today isn't present. And if it's not present, then it's really tough for it to heal well. But when it's present, what I watch happen in my office is just so rich, as I watch people become something that they never believed they could become, as they center in and settle into something that they really like in themselves, and the fear and the things that tear us down begins to fall off, because of the refining of this intense trauma, this intense wound, and learning how to grow past it, to not let it define us or to define the relationships. And yeah, I do think that that a breach of trust, that a betrayal, at the core of who we are, is deeply wounding, is some of the worst kind of damage that can happen to somebody. That takes different forms for different people. I work with financial betrayal, where a spouse has had a whole secret life of finances, kept away from the other, and all of a sudden it explodes and comes out. And that can be really deep. Emotional kind of betrayal. Relational betrayal in families, that happens. I do think something about the sexual betrayals is more central to who we are and wounds us at a deeper level. And I don't think just because we were taught that, I think it's just part of how we're wired. I think the only thing that gets deeper is a spiritual wound, a spiritual betrayal. And we tend to be pretty protected and blocked from those. We don't let people into that part of who we are very well. But if the cases that I've worked with where that has been combined, that you are my spiritual leader or you're my spiritual mate, and we add a sexual betrayal into it. And I think that's part of why betrayals from pastors or clergy or priests can be really devastating to people at the core. So yeah, this kind of betrayal is central to who we are. And the beauty of it is, what you're saying is true. Seeing the pathway out of it is kind of consistent anytime that there's a breach, a wound.
Well, and I find that a lot of couples that I've worked with, again, taking so much of what you have taught me to share with them and lead them through that healing journey, the relief I feel that they get when they come into the office or come into the session and realize there's some kind of plan. There's some kind
Right.
of not equation, because nothing about relationships
We're too
is math
complex.
equation. Yes, but that
Yes.
there is a plan or an approach or a proven kind of, I call them phases. Maybe you call them stages, but there's just kind of a plan, and that organizes their pain. And I think gives them a little bit of hope to go, at least we have a direction to go from here. When before coming
Mhm.
in, they feel like there is like just no hope and no direction at all.
Right. Yeah,
So,
to sit across from somebody and say, hey, I know the road that you need to walk. I will walk it with you. Whether you want to stay on it or not is totally up to you. And there will be lots of bumps we don't anticipate, but we can do that. I know how to do this because I walked so many people through it. And you just watch people, settle because they believed that this was the end of their life and that everything that they'd experienced was a lie and there's no future moving forward. And to be able to go, no, that's not true. There's a part of this that is very devastating, but there is a path forward.
I think that's also the part of going back to what we started with. I think that's also the healing of the 12 steps, that it's not the plan itself that is like the perfect
Mhm.
answer. It's the fact that there is a direction to go. And when we can
Right,
organize the chaos in a way to go, let's just take the next step. And that people have walked this path before, which I
right,
think is, maybe this is a spoiler alert of where we can go later, but why I think it's so important for people in the healing journey to, at some point when they have enough healing, to be able to provide some kind of purpose to what they've been through, knowing that people have walked the path before, that there is some kind of plan is just a relief. And so it's not that the 12 steps are perfect, it just means it's a plan for when things are disordered or disorderly.
and unfortunately, often the stories that are told are the stories that are not complete healing
Yeah.
because those people are still they want to punish, they want to get their story out there, they want to protect, they want to so those stories are prevalent, and there's a sense of you can't recover because I couldn't recover, and if you can recover maybe I should have recovered. And so we get this tension that happens in culture. Those that truly heal well, it becomes a part of their past.
Yeah.
They never forget it. It doesn't go away, but it no longer is present for them. It no longer gets in the way. When it pops up, they look at it and go, oh, hi, yeah, I remember you, but I'm going this way. And it falls back into the background. So we don't hear those stories because they don't want to harp on them. They don't want to go drag up what's in the past and all the wounds. It's been healed. They've truly moved on past it. And to ask them to go back and tell that story is difficult for them because they're having to go back to something that's truly been healed.
Mm.
And so sometimes I'll ask a couple, would you sit with somebody you've really healed? And they'll go, oh, of course we would do that. And they come back and go, we did that. Please don't ask us to do it again. We have healed from that. And to go back and set in it was really tough.
Mhm.
So I think we don't hear those stories as much, but wow, they are all over out there.
I want to go back to, I think, the big question that I have for you for today, which is, when you look back on so many complex, what other people would say, very difficult to heal kinds of conflict, is there a theme? Um, is there something that stands out as critically important that had to be in place? Maybe not the equation, but the things that you look back on that say, you know what, this has to be in place for healing to happen. It's almost like a secret sauce, if you will. But like,
Right.
surely after all of this time, you've picked up on those themes of like, if we don't have these things, I don't know if I can guarantee healing for you.
Yep. There definitely is. And it took me a while to figure out what I was watching for and what I was seeing. But today, when a couple comes in and I begin the story, I always ask the wounded spouse to tell the story. And they sometimes wonder because I'm not the one that did this story, they did. But I want to hear them tell what they're aware of. And I'm watching I'm watching the wounding spouse, the one who betrayed, the one who caused the offense. I'm watching their responses because I'm looking for two things. In the wounding spouse, the one who caused the betrayal, and I tend to use that language, wounding versus wounded spouse. In the wounding spouse, I need to see contrition. I need to see that they truly get the wound that they've done as much as they can to this point in the story. They get it, that they caused a wound. Even if it wasn't their intent to cause this level of wound, they did. And they can own it, and it causes a sense of regret in them. If they sit there and I see them downcast and I see them hurting for their spouse as the spouse tells the story of what they did, okay, we got this. We can do this. If I see defensiveness, if I see, well, I did because you, okay, I may come home and my wife goes, "How was your day? Had a new couple. What do you think?" Not sure I'm going to pull that one out of the fire. There's not the brokenness yet, and sometimes I can help people to get there. Sometimes I can't. But I'm watching for that contrition in the wounding spouse, and we can unpack what that means. And then for the wounded spouse, I need to see some hint of grace, some hint of, I see the best in you anyways. What my buddy used to call the and. I can see that you're a good person and you wounded me badly. Not because you wounded me badly, you're a bad person now. And I can't ever get back to that. That sense of grace that maybe someday I'll be able to forgive you. I want to be able to forgive you. I can still see the good in you, the value in you. If I can catch any hint of grace, okay, we got this. We can do it. And if both of them if there's contrition and grace, I have total confidence that this couple it'll be a rough, difficult, long journey, but they will be fine.
Well, and let's zoom in on that just a little bit, because first let's go to, I can imagine people who are listening who've been through any kind of broken trust might have a reaction going on in them. Hearing you say all of that. So let's start with the wounding spouse and that contrition. First of all, for those who have maybe not heard of that word contrition before, maybe define that, but also how do we separate, or can we separate contrition from shame? Because there's a lot of material out there. Yeah, there's a lot of material in the world right now about shame and being aware of shame. And I often use Brene Brown's definition of shame versus guilt. And so there's a lot of awareness out there. Maybe not enough of it still, but there is some talk about what to do with shame. So maybe you could pull those apart.
Yeah. I looked up the definition. The etymology comes from the Latin, which reading here, it's to grind down or to be crushed. And I think that's interesting.
For shame or for contrition?
For contrition.
Okay.
It comes from a word meaning to be ground down, to be crushed, to be broken. And that's the picture that I get of somebody who's contrite, is there is my defensiveness has been removed. That sometimes a spouse will get defensive, and I'll look at him and say, "You have no right to be defensive right now. You're looking at your spouse saying, you should be over this. I'm sorry, you have no right to say that." Saying it means you don't understand the depth of the pain that you caused. And once you understand the depth of the pain you caused, you realize you have nothing to stand on in defensiveness. To me, that's contrite. I am acutely aware of the amount of damage that I have done. And I own that damage. That doesn't mean I own the intent. And sometimes I'll see a battle over that a spouse will say, "You intended to do this." And I think, no, they didn't. And you're asking them to own something that wasn't true. They're not a bad person. They didn't intend to do this. They got caught up in something, or they made some stupid mistakes, or they dropped their guard. But they can own that I made a decision that caused intense wound in you. That's a critical part of it. And then that sense of, so it's not just the ownership, but it's also the regret that comes with it. not the regret for getting caught, but the regret for the impact of what I did, that we feel an appropriate level of sorry and moral discomfort. You're right. To me, that's different than shame, because if I move into shame and self-pity, I've just flipped the story and I'm making it about my wound, and I'm not contrite. Now I'm almost asking the wounded spouse to care for me like I'm wounded. And that is so inappropriate, and it throws the whole balance off. Versus if we said in the language that I use with people is, look and say, you have a new mantra. I bought this. I bought this. Whatever comes from your spouse, I bought this. I don't believe for a minute you intended to extract this high of a cost, but you did. And you extracted an enormous, often I'll use the language, you took out a debt that you stood on an altar and promised you would never take out. And you took that debt out in your spouse's name, and the debt sits in their lap and has developed an enormous amount of interest. You cannot pay it off, but you took out the debt, a debt you promised you wouldn't, that they trusted that you wouldn't take out. And now you have to step back and own that the debt and the interest is in your spouse's lap, and you cannot pay it off. They're going to have to. And when you can be truly sorrowful for that, without it being about you, then we develop a willingness to make changes and move forward. That I want to do something different. How do I make amends for this? How do I spend a lot of time, and we can unpack this, but I spend a lot of time talking about the concept of penance, that we do things that make a difference to try to bring about some of the healing. So I think it starts with that sense of true ownership of the damage. There's a genuine kind of sorrow for causing that ownership, not a defensiveness, not a blame, not a self-pity, not a shame. And then how do I try to make this somewhat better? How do I maybe heal the relationship? Definitely try to repair as much as I can the wound that I've caused. And to me, that those three things come together to illustrate a sense of contrition. Theology has spent quite a bit of time talking about it. There's not been that word isn't used much in research, but the concepts have been researched and shown to be really powerful.
So let me ask you this, just to clarify. You brought up the metaphor of debt. When you talk about it's a debt that you cannot pay,
Right.
just for clarity, are you saying that the wounded spouse and the amount of work that they're going to have to do is the debt that you're speaking of?
The amount of work that they have to do and the wound to them. One of I use a lot of word pictures for couples. And I think you've heard me go through some of those word pictures, but one of them is, let's say the husband is a runner and he is regularly running. He loves to run. And one day he's out stretching. He's not paying attention, listening to his earbuds. And she backs out the car and backs over his ankle and foot, totally accidental, crushes the bones in his ankle and his foot. Well, that's an enormous amount of pain. She didn't intend to do that, but she did it. She was inattentive. And caused it. If she blows up at him for stretching in the driveway, that's not helpful.
Right.
And yet we don't expect him to run that day. He's going to spend probably 3 months in surgeries. Yeah. Just trying to and then we don't expect him to run. He's going to spend months of retraining and maybe even learning how to use his ankle again. And then we still don't expect him to be running a marathon. Now he's got lots of training to do to get back up to. This is a long journey of healing for him and a lot of pain. And for her to sit in a state of, I caused this. I am so sorry. I cannot do anything I can make it worse. But I can't do anything to fix this for you. The healing's going to take what the healing takes. I think contrition is that setting into I did this, not beating yourself up for it, not making it worse, but true ownership and acknowledging that there's an enormous debt that I caused. The pain, all of the healing that has to, and I'm keeping you from the vision that you had. You had a vision for who we were going to be as a runner in this example, but who we were going to be as a couple and a family. I didn't think you were going to be the kind of spouse that would ever do this. What does that mean for my world and my choices and picking you and how much of the life we've had together is real? Everything is shattered. That's an enormous step.
It's an everyday choice to, and I think this gets into the wounded spouse and grace, because it's an everyday choice for that runner to decide to deal with whatever the emotions that are coming up about that loss of that dream and about recovery and what it's going to take for them to push through PT, to push through the pain of recovery, right? And the mental state, that internal work that it takes to even stay, dare we say, hopefully kind.
But that is part of where I say the wounded or the wounding spouse needs to take the approach of I bought this, because there will be days that the wounded spouse cannot do that. There will be days that the pain is so intense that they're screaming out, that they're afraid, that they're angry, that they cannot accept, and they want the wounding spouse to feel pain. And so they lash out. And I look at the wounding spouse and I say, your mantra is, I bought this. I chose this by what I did. Again, didn't intend to choose this, but you chose this. Can you receive it? Can you pay off that part that's yours? And if you can, that's more of a contrite heart and a more contrite spirit. The moment you get defensive and say, I shouldn't have to do this, well, none of this is fair. They should not have to be paying this cost. You promised them they wouldn't. They shouldn't have to. This is not fair that they have to do it. Don't talk to me about fair. You have no grounds to stand on.
Well, and this is an important moment for those that are listening to, if this doesn't directly tie into your story or experience, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode, because this is not just about a fair recovery. This is about us as human beings and the way that we relate to the world, because all of us experience moments of broken trust, whether it's with family members, whether it's with institutions, whether it's with your fellow man. That happens outside of marriage as well. And so as you're listening to Dr. Mike talk about, the wounded party versus the wounding party, I think all of us have to do that hard work to go, I know what it's like, or can I remember, or can I put myself in both of those roles? And be willing to see the capacity of what it would ask of me, whichever role I might find myself in.
Can I emphasize that just a second? We are recording this a couple of weeks before Christmas, and yesterday a couple sat in my office, and mom had done some deep wounds around the holidays. And this whole process has to play out around, mom saying something that was really uncalled for and horrific to her daughter-in-law. Okay, this process comes into play. So yeah, it's universal. It happens on companies, or a company messes up and really wounds their customer base. If they can follow these principles, they can reset it and reheal it, and can be in a better light in terms of their customers. If they don't get this right, they may have appropriately lost a customer, because if contrition's not there, it's not safe.
100%. In fact, that is, for those of you who are listening that are in the military sphere, that's something that we have been going through and are going through, is our relationship with the institution. And when the institution makes decisions that contribute harm or wounding or misunderstanding or any of that, it's part of being in a relationship, that we can ask the institution or look at our relationship with the institution and ask ourselves, why am I feeling what I'm feeling? What's appropriate for me to feel? And what's appropriate for me to ask when I'm in relationship with an institution? Or if you are, like Dr. Mike is saying, you're in that leadership role, what is your role as a leader, as being the mouthpiece of the institution, and the role that you can play in repairing relationships?
Right. Because, and I know we want to get to the other side of the story, but if you're if you're in a relationship, any of these that we just talked about, and the wounding individual, the wounding company, the wounding spouse is not contrite, it's not safe yet. And I've said to so many wounded spouses, it is appropriate that you are heavily boundaried right now. It is appropriate that you are protective. It's appropriate that you are asking for distance because they're not contrite. They're not safe. They are not taking ownership for the wound that they caused and what they did that caused that wound, which means they might do it again because they don't get it. Not really. They're paying lip service. They're trying to get away. They're trying to make it all smoothed out and make it all better. Without contrition, they're not safe. So that doesn't mean that we need to leave the relationship yet. It might in time, but it means that that barrier of I'm not going to trust you yet is appropriate. If they experience true contrition, then it does shift the weight back to now what does it take to choose to trust at another level. But until that occurs, I invite spouses to be really cautious in moving forward. Sometimes they choose to move forward anyways and develop trust, and it goes well. But I think that's kind of thin ice, because if the contrition's not there, again, like I said, there's not a true awareness and an ownership, which means it may come back around.
Our story has been such that, to use some of the framework that you're bringing, that the institution who is not expected to be perfect either. I think that's a huge part of this. And we're going to maybe get into that when we talk about grace, but the institution that promised a set of things, provisions, family quality of life, housing, safe housing, healthcare, like, whatever, you felt like you were promised coming into the institution. And then after 2 decades of global conflict, and then the way that we came out of that Afghanistan withdrawal, and then going right back into what's being asked of us today, we are having a retention crisis. Now we're seeing recruiting numbers go up, and that's a whole other episode of why those numbers are going up. But we're seeing a retention crisis because more and more people who've been in are setting some of those boundaries that I think you're talking about, Dr. Mike, which is something is off here. The thing that you promised is not being delivered. We keep asking for, let's say, less mold in barracks and housing, and you said you would provide safe housing, or there's food insecurity going on, and so waiting for years for that pay increase. Or, we could go through a whole list of things. It's why I wrote The Military Culture Shift. But the point is, I came out of writing that book, unfortunately, disillusioned and realizing I wrote a Greek tragedy, because we had entered into a relationship that, similar to, and I even write about that word of betrayal that was used on social media over the last 2 decades, as more and more families started to use that word of going, is this relationship, the institution to its people, does the institution see it as worthy of repair? Because if there is never that contrite heart, never that transparency, never that willingness to make amends, what does that say about the relationship that I'm in with and whether or not we feel safe? And so now we're seeing that retention of people leaving and saying, I think I'm ready to have a different kind of relationship or a different quality of life from me or my family, that sort of thing. And so this goes into that conversation about grace, because I also found in writing the book and doing the research that we as a community are habitually trained to abandon ourselves and to not expect contrition, to almost give too much grace, or to just say, well, it's an institution and they're meant to fight and defend the nation and to deter wars. And so we can't expect it to be relational. And so there was a constant overwriting of the wounds that I was seeing happening. And then as I've traveled around and taught on the topic of assertiveness and boundaries, seeing that both spouses and military service members struggle with boundary setting and assertiveness, because there's not the regular practice of knowing how to set or have those conversations, even, that there's almost too much grace offered. And so I want to ask you about this grace, because you kind of answered my first question. You kind of
Before you do,
Please.
I wonder, and you would know this way better than I do, but I wonder, do we have this myth that a warrior doesn't care? Do we have this myth that a warrior has to be right? And if you challenge a warrior, he has to override this. And I think the reality of it is the most powerful warriors care the most. The most powerful warriors in all of our mythology stories are the ones who have such tender hearts and fight because of deep compassion and care. Well, a deep compassion and care, when they screw it up, when they get it wrong, when they look and they see you are not in a safe home, you don't have the basic needs, that their heart breaks for that person and they engage the warrior to solve the problem. And right now, what I tend to see from the outside is they engage the warrior to protect, and that's not going to work.
But I would also say, Dr. Mike, is that there is a culture of fear that if you hold the institution accountable, if you say you hurt me or you've wounded my family or you have steered me wrong, whether it's and this doesn't have to be about global conflict and our involvement in global conflict. This can just be about over the course of your career, as you know, you were promised one duty station and you're sent to another, or you've been told that we're going to take care of your family and then we don't. We're going to give you safe housing and then it's not. And then you have long-term effects of health on your family. Like, it can be those everyday experiences. There is a culture of fear that if you hold the institution accountable and ask to be in a relationship and navigate the rules of a relationship, that you are very quickly reminded that this is not a relationship. This is an arrangement. And so that gets us down a rabbit hole of what we're really dealing with here. But you are right. There is a show no cracks and be the solution, the solutionists, is that a word? And also a fear-based mentality of, if you advocate, then there's reprisal. If you hold accountable, there's reprisal. And
that is at its core a lack of contrition. And it cannot move forward, and they're not safe. When I watch that happen, let's say we'll reverse it. Let's say the husband is the wounding spouse, and she is asking for contrition, and he responds in that defensive kind of a way. And I like your language there. This is not a relationship. This is an arrangement, and this is what I'm going to ask you to do in this arrangement. I just look at her and say, okay, these are the new terms. You don't have to accept them. You can, but the choice is accept them or walk. He's just made that really clear. Sitting here and demanding that he be different when he's said, this is the way I'm going to work. You don't have the power to make him to be different. And I see that happen. My desire would be, that we have this group of people that we call on them to be our warriors, that they engage that warrior mentality to fight for their troops, to fight for the people that have agreed to be under them and to serve and to literally die for them, that they would fight for them, instead of them being probably too strong language, but fodder for the battle. That's not okay. Right. Yeah. Right. But that takes a contrition, and it takes an awareness, and like you say, it takes a relationship that has to grow from inside, but has to be a part of the leadership. And now I move into territory that would be dangerous for me because I'm looking from the outside.
No. I think sometimes outside is quite clear, quite clear perspective.
The moment we allow another, whether it be our spouse, whether it be our community, whether it be an institution, the moment we allow another to define us, then we become a victim and we become powerless. And Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning identified that they can't hurt me. Not really. Not if I'm centered. Not if I know what my core is and I'm grounded in it. Then I can be safe from within, and I am no longer a victim in this process. And there's there's obviously caveats and balances to play here. But when we center ourselves, and I am going to be this kind of a person, I'm going to be contrite in my relationships, and I'm going to be contrite in how I engage with my superiors, whether they are or not, because that's what I demand of me. That's the kind of person I am. Now I'm not a victim in this process. Now I'm centered, I'm not reactive, and I'm able to think through, how do I want to respond to what you're doing, which is wounding and not fair, not okay. But I'm still okay. Wounded, but I'm still okay. And I still get to make decisions in moving forward. That sense of centering, and that is, I think, where grace has to come in. Whether we're going to heal the relationship or not, whether I'm going to be in relationship with you or not, I have to begin to extend a sense of grace. You said that they're people, and I have to look and go, they're not perfect. They're doing stupid things out of their own fears, or out of their own self-protectiveness, or out of their own ignorance, or for a variety of reasons. They're being human. And so many times I look at my spouses and say, no, you have to allow your spouse to be human. You cannot ask them to be not human. They're going to make mistakes. And grace is saying, you will make mistakes. I will get wounded in this relationship. That's a part of being in. The closer we get to somebody, the more wounding potential there is. That's a part of this. But I choose to believe the best in you anyways. And that's where sometimes it gets tough, because is it bad skill? Is it bad decision making? Is it bad choices? Is it mistakes? Or do you have a bad heart? And you're going to continually do something that is wounding to me because you don't really care. If so, I have to get safe while still extending grace, and that's tough.
I can feel there being a question there. I can hear somebody saying to me, ask him to expand on a bad heart, because I think that in our woundedness, it's very quick to become defensive and label someone as having a bad heart. So could you differentiate between a bad heart and just human?
So let me start by saying I've been working with people in a counseling type of a role, whether that was just addictions counselor or for almost 40 years now, 38, 39 years. In all of that time, I think I have worked with maybe 6 people who have a bad heart. So I have lots of spouses that drag their partner in going, they have a bad heart. She's just mean and vindictive. She can't see anything positive. She's so hypercritical. She's a bad heart. And I learned, no, she's so deeply wounded. She's hypersensitive. This isn't a bad heart. Or he is narcissistic. I'm getting to detest that word.
Yes.
No. That's not what that means. Yes, selfish, protective, not empathic enough. But this is bad skill. He doesn't have a bad heart. He is a good man. It's just, nobody's taught him how to do this well. We can do this. You can teach him. I can teach him. That's not a bad heart. Occasionally, I come across somebody that truly does have a bad heart. They do not care. They're just in it for themselves. I think we could spot people in public culture that we'd look at and go, yeah, I'm not sure you really care about anything other than you. I'm not, and you're willing to run roughshod over anybody and hurt anybody for you. I question whether you have a good heart. Often, though, sitting in session as a therapist, and I get one-on-one with them, and we dig down in, I find that underneath all of this protectiveness, where they are bringing the warrior out to protect a wounded heart. And if we can peel that back, dude, you're a scared 9-year-old. Okay, you don't have a bad heart. You just have engaged all the skills that you have to protect that. And you don't know how to not wound people. But that's not a bad heart. Grace is the ability to look past all of this poor skill, all of this inability to relax, to be contrite because you're terrified, and to see that terrified little kid under there who just needs somebody to say, you did it right.
Mm-hmm.
I accept you. You're a good person.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you fighting for me. And touch that. If we can get to see that person and fight for it, now we believe in them. I often have interns sit in my office and observe, while they're learning, and they're observing me. They're not observing the couple that I'm working with. And the couple will leave and they'll go, I can't believe you said that to him. I can't believe he sat here after you said that to him. I'm like, yeah, that was really hard words to say to him. Why did he receive it? Because he knows you care about him. He knows I believe in him. He knows that in the core of me, I believe in him. Dude, you can do this. We're going to take all those warrior skills and we're going to direct it just a few degrees off. And you're going to be non-stoppable. And people are going to line up behind you, and people are going to be proud to be in relationship with you because you're a warrior who now has owned this wounded, scared little boy and doesn't have to protect him any longer. And that if we can see that and believe in it, you're right. I think most of the time we step back and we go, yeah, I can't see that. You're a bad person. You have a bad heart. There's nothing redeemable and good in you. And in my experience, Corey, that is so very rare, but it does happen. But it's so rare. I've looked at a couple of husbands. I've looked at a couple of wives, and I've said, I do not say this. You need to leave.
Yeah.
This is not safe. That doesn't mean you have to divorce, but you have to create space because they are not safe. And I'm not sure they ever will be safe. If they're not going to protect you, you have to protect you. You have to. That's the right thing to do. But that is so rare.
Rare. Thank you for saying
that. Sometimes it exists for a time too. That you wounded them deeply. They're this, tender kitten who's been backed down into a corner and tormented to the point that they are coming up your arm every time you try to reach in. We need to give them some space so they can recenter, they can calm down, and they can find the good in them again and begin to act out of it. Sometimes there's not good in them, but that is very rare.
That's a very important distinction. So thank you for sharing that. I think it'd be good for us to zoom out a little bit and think outside of the marriage. And, our society right now is so divided, and not getting into necessarily a political conversation here, but just as we think about what does it mean to engage the world? Like you talked about in the beginning, when somebody has been on that addictions journey, that relapse prevention journey, to have a different way that they see and approach the world. And so I want us to zoom out and think about how can we better apply this? We've talked a little bit about institutions, but engaging with the world when we can only control ourselves, it's not good for us to be alone, and it's not good for us to stay divided, and at least within our family members, right? Nobody has to say that we have to get along with everybody in the world, but surely there is some of this that we can apply as we are seeing the state of our relationship to the idea of community. So has that come up for you at all, either in your mind or in sessions, as we've seen more and more conflict come into our culture?
We were created, we survive. Whether you take a creationist type of an approach or an evolutionary type of an approach, we can argue it from both sides. We do best in community. And in fact, I think we only survive in community. We only change in relationship. Those are so critical to us. But I could be really wrong in this. But I believe that we're buying into a lie that safety comes only from without. That you have to be a certain way for me to be safe. And we teach a very subtle but clear message that if you're not safe, you need to pull back, which we've articulated in here. If your spouse truly isn't safe, then you need to create space. But we have centered all of safety on the other. You have to be the way I want you to be for me to be safe. That's not true. Safety comes from within first. I tell this story that years ago, H1N1 was coming to the United States, swine flu, and unlike COVID, which attacked our elderly, it attacked kids. And so the CDC brought the school nurses in to train them what to watch for, because saying, you are our front line. You will know when it hits the US before anybody else, because it's going to show up in the elementary nurses' offices. So here's what to look for. And they taught them all this stuff that our culture now knows, 6 foot away and glove and mask. And we need to stop transmission of this virus and all the stuff that post-COVID we kind of intuitively know. That was not known by everybody then. So my wife at the time was a school nurse, so she was a part of that. And a couple of months later, she comes home and says, it's in our school. Oh, it is. She says, yeah, this little kindergarten girl. And what'd you do? Well, expecting, you isolated, you did all of the sterilization. And she's like, oh, she's a kindergartner. She wants her mom. Now she's sick. She really wants her mom. So I held her on my lap and I wiped her runny nose until her mom got there. Mm. Okay, why could my wife sit and hold this viral-ridden, runny-nose, kid, waiting for mom to get there? Was she not concerned about bringing this disease home to her littles? Mm-hmm. The difference was not only had she gone through the training, but she had been part of the research to make sure that they were giving the right amount of the vaccine. So she had gone through, and by the end of the study, they knew they had tested she was immune. Mm. So she could sit and hold this viral-ridden kid with confidence. Was the disease any less deadly in her lap? No, not at all. The difference was her immunity. Mm. And we don't teach people that the difference is your immunity. Okay, your spouse is hypercritical. Your spouse is a little bit on the spectrum and has a hard time being empathic. Your spouse is a human and imperfect. Stop asking them to be totally different for you to be safe. What does it take for you to learn to center yourself, to not be reactive, to be safe in this relationship? You can do that. You have agency. You have the ability to find some safety. It may mean we create some distance for a bit until we learn how. It may be that there are some things that is just not safe to go to with you, because you get reactive to it. And I will say, we don't ask anybody to develop an immunity to Ebola. Mm-hmm. We say, you protect, you get away from it. There are some people that are so safe or so unsafe, we don't develop an immunity to them. We distance ourselves. I'm not going to be around that person. They are not safe. And sometimes it's just because it's not worth the energy that goes into finding safety with this person. But generally, we can learn to be safe around just about anybody, because we learn to step beside mom says stuff that's just really wounding. I learned to step beside it. It's just mom. No, I'm not going to attack it. I'm not going to try to make her be different. She's 60 years old. I'm not going to change this. I'm going to step beside it and lean in anyways, because she can't really hurt me. Yes, it's not nice. It's not fair. It's not good. But she's my mom. I'm going to extend grace. This is who she is, and I'm going to lean in. Again, there are places that we draw some boundaries to keep ourselves safe, but the safety comes from here first, not from out here. Well, when we teach people that your mom has to be different for you to be okay, I just made you a victim. And the only option you have is to pull away or demand that the other be different. Well, demanding that society be different, demanding that our leaders be different, demanding that a company be different, it's not working. And it keeps us a victim.
Because you're right. If it's mentioned that other way, like, you're forced to manage them and you're forced to expect something of them that you can't ensure or guarantee.
And then all we do is we get angrier and angrier. Yeah. And that doesn't work.
What are some things that you've found, again, kind of looking over your span of working with so many different kinds of people, not just your own experience of this in your own life? What would you say helps people find that state?
That state of inner peace, that state of calm. Mm-hmm. This is coming off the top of my head, but I think initially of two things. One is my own sense of contrition, my own sense of brokenness, my own sense of surrender. I am not perfect. I am a flawed individual. I have incurred enormous debt in life and who I am and what I've done, not because I intend to. I think I've got a pretty good heart, but man, I screw up. And if I can stay in that space, it allows me to be more gracious and I understand some of the impact. And then I think vision is so critical. Any businessman knows if his company doesn't have a clear vision and he keeps people moving toward it, they're going to flounder. I need to have a vision for who I am going to be, who I need to be in this relationship. So to give another example, it's the time of year that I love because we're dealing with extended family. And dad really is a piece of work. And dad did some things that were really out of line. And giving the client permission to not go to Christmas this year, go do something else, because we have to help you to heal enough to reset. But that doesn't mean you never go to Christmas. Your vision is, I'm going to lean back into this relationship. I'm not going to demand that dad be different because he's probably not going to be. I'm going to learn how to manage myself well in dad's presence so I can engage and be in a relationship with him that I am still safe. And it does mean readjusting some boundaries and protecting. But I can lean in and do this, or not. But he can learn how to be safe and to step into it. But it takes, who am I going to be? And I'm not going to let what dad's doing make me any less. One of my teachers used to say, do not let anybody get the best of you, because when they get the best of you, what they leave behind, you don't want to be. And you can't not resent them having the best of you. And yet you surrendered it. You gave it. And I always like that way of looking at it. I gave up. I let them get the best of me. And I'm sitting here holding something that I don't like in me. Do not do that. Always hang on to the best of me, no matter what somebody else is doing. But I need to know what I'm fighting for. For me as a faith follower, that's the words of Christ. I want so desperately to be that. And that gives me a very clear vision of who I need to be when the world is chaotic around me.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And it's, one of the things that I've said to people, like I am against people cutting off family members unless it's for actual safety reasons. And because I say there will always be a Christmas dinner, there will always be a funeral, or you will still have to face this relationship and decide what you're going to do with it. And I always think about keeping my side of the street clean. Like, do I want to be at that funeral and realize that I have a lot to apologize for because of how I handled the situation and the damage that I caused? Or do I do the hard work of continuing to engage and figure out how do you be in the presence of that person?
Right.
As you are saying. And so I imagine if somebody's listening to this and they have, great intentions to go and not give the best of themselves away, and they find themselves triggered is an overused word too, if we want to put it on the list of overused words with narcissism and other ones that we've said today.
I like clinicians cringe at.
Yes. In fact, a friend of mine gave me the word activated, which I think is such a good word because that's how it feels when you feel activated in that moment and you sense like, oh, this is not going the direction Dr. Mike told me to take it in. Like I'm fully activated here and I'm about to hand the best of myself over. Maybe just like, what's one thing that they can do? I mean, I think of a timeout, but like, what's one thing that they could do in a timeout or to just recenter?
So I love Activate because that's exactly what's going on in our body. Our primitive brain has recognized threat and we're going into auto protect mode. And in auto protect mode, we blow up, cave in, or run away. And I cannot blow up, cave in, or run away even subtly. And because if I do, it's going to get messed up and I've just surrendered the best of me. So I have to pause and allow my body to reset. And that's a timeout. And so I invite people to step back, create some physical distance, and then as soon as they can, ask the question. And I say, do it in a prayer. If they don't believe in prayer, they can do it in that type of a mindset where they're asking themselves. But the question is, what am I being selfish about? Because if I'm activated, I'm not getting something that I want, that I believe I need, that I believe I deserve. What am I being selfish about? And most of the time, what you'll come back with is what I'm being selfish about is good. I'm asking for safety. I'm asking to be cared for. I'm asking to be seen. I'm asking to be acknowledged. I'm asking to be understood. I'm asking to be believed. Whatever it is, what I'm asking for is good, and it's being withheld from me. Okay, that's not okay, but it is what it is. How do I want to respond? Is there a way that I can ask for my need, my desire, that is potentially going to be more effective, that is going to engage them? Is there a different way to approach this that may help them to see what I'm really asking for? I have the ability to change this, but I have to center myself first and figure out who I'm going to be in this interaction. And I think it starts with what's really going on. What do I really want here? That's not happening. And to give her some permission that it's probably going to be good, but the way we're going about it is probably not my best way. My continual question is, how can you be the kind of person that you look back on 10, 20 years from now and you're proud of who you are today? You know, not because you did it right, you did it the best you could with the information and the skills you had. I want you to be proud of you. So how do we make that decision? Well, that fits into our vision. You know, what kind of a person are you going to be proud of? Do you know who that is? Hanging on to that, recentering around that. I think that makes all the difference. And for those that are listening, I hope you feel like this is not scripted and there's not 4 steps to do this. And if you do these 4 steps, you got it right, because humans and relationships are way, way, way too messy for that. And there's always caveats. And the moment you think of a caveat, challenge yourself, because this may be defensiveness, this may be excuses, but it may be that, this is one of those that is inherently not safe or is not workable.
I'm imagining so many people throughout the holidays stepping into the restroom and having this conversation with himself in the mirror. So yes. I hope that it's helpful. I could go on.
Stepping into the closet to pull out the hidden bottle of wine. Yes.
Closet is good too. It's good too. So maybe because I could just spend hours with you. I think I have 2 questions. I mean, I have lots of questions, but I'm going to try to come only down to 2 more. If you could imagine a community, even a nation, that was grace-centered, like what would we look like if we could behave or leverage some of the tools that you've talked about today? What would be different about our culture and society? Again, not saying any one of us is responsible to make it happen, but what are we aiming for, I guess, is the big question.
You know, the people that I work with that are truly filled with grace are those that understand self. They have, as I said, their own lived sense of contrition, their own sense of brokenness and surrender. And they step in with such profound strength that is so tender. And I think a nation that, we have, looking at ours, we have such strength when marshaled well. But when we remove the heart, then it becomes predatory. Then it becomes not safe. Then it becomes abusive. Then it becomes a misuse of power. And to add that sense of deep, profound care, again, we go back to the warrior who's fighting for the right things, who's fighting to protect, who's fighting. Everybody wants to be on the side of that kind of a person. Nobody wants to be on the side of the individual that just goes in and has no care and concern and wipes out. We're wrestling with that right now in the media. Should there have been grace? Should there have not been grace? And who do we want to be as a people when there's something that maybe legitimately is wrong? But how far do we allow ourselves to go before we pull it back and extend some grace and try to figure out a different way to move? And I think there's a sense of, when we look at some of the grand stories throughout history, some of the fables and some of the rich stories that become cultural stories, The hero is a gracious person. The hero is a compassionate, caring person, and they are the idealized warrior at that point. And I think I think companies embody that. We look at companies that we go, yeah, that one's not any good. And we look at companies that, oh yeah, they screw up sometimes, but man, I am so much a fan of that company because of how they handle themselves. And countries being the same way, that we can create a level of protection and safety for our own and for others that is profound when we allow the messiness of that grace and boundaries and protection and safety to all intermingle. And I do think, to go back to what you said, I think it takes community to figure that out. I think it takes me sitting across from you and going, okay, I don't know how to handle this. Let's think through this. And we allow the body, we allow differing minds and differing skills and differing perspectives to speak into it, to come up with, this is who we're going to be. And no one person gets to make any decision alone. That's always dangerous.
Beautifully said. All right, here's the last question. Maybe easier, maybe harder. Depends on how you receive it. If you could go back and say something to your younger self, and I'm going to let you decide what age that would be, what stage that would be. We've spent so much time talking about grace today. But what would you say to your younger you?
Chill out.
Chill out.
Because we all have those things that we get stuck on, those humannesses, and I want things to be right. I want it to be done this way, and if it's not, the anxiety is there, and learning in life that I'm not capable. Why am I asking others to be capable? Just relaxing. And when I got to where I could laugh at my foibles, when I could laugh at my errors, when I could laugh at stuff that was going wrong, life got a lot easier for me internally. And so it'd be, chill out. You're not going to get it right. You're not going to get good grades on everything. You're not going to have everybody think you're brilliant on everything. It's just chill out. It's not going to happen. It's fine. I think that would be the key.
Every time I talk with Dr. Mike, I'm reminded that the most powerful work in the world doesn't usually happen in big ways or in the spotlight. It happens in a quiet room, 2 people at a time, with a lot of honest words and often a lot of tissues. A few themes stayed with me from this conversation. The first is his picture of a contrite heart. Not shame, not self-pity where the person who did the harm suddenly becomes the main victim in the story, but a grounded kind of humility that says, I did this. I may not have intended to hurt you this deeply, but I did. I own the impact. I'm not going to get defensive, and as much as I can, I'm going to show up for the long, slow work of repair. That's true in a marriage after an affair. It's true when a parent has crossed the line with their adult children. It's true when a leader or even an institution has broken trust with the people it serves. Without that kind of contrition, trust can't safely be rebuilt, and boundaries are not only appropriate, they're necessary. The second theme is grace, not cheap grace that pretends nothing happened, not grace that asks you to abandon yourself or stay in harm's way. The kind of grace Dr. Mike described is the ability, when it's safe, to still see the humanity in the other person, to say, you wounded me, you were wrong, and I still believe there's something good in you that is worth fighting for. He reminded us that truly bad hearts are rare. Most of the time, what we're encountering is fear, bad skills, or unhealed wounds acting out. That doesn't mean we tolerate cruelty. It does mean we don't rush to declare someone beyond redemption when what we're actually seeing is immaturity, pain, or terrible coping strategies. And then there was his third thread, safety that begins from within. In a culture that keeps telling us you can only be safe if everyone around you behaves exactly the way you want, Dr. Mike offered a quiet but radical alternative. You can cultivate an inner immunity. That doesn't mean ignoring abuse or pretending harmful behavior is okay. It means knowing who you are, what you value, and who you want to be, so clearly that other people's reactions don't get to hijack your character. I heard this especially in his question, 10 or 20 years from now, when you look back at this moment, will you be proud of who you were? As someone who's spent a lot of time inside military culture, I can't help but hear how relevant all of this is there too. We ask leaders to be warriors, to carry immense responsibility, to absorb pressure, to make hard calls. But the strongest warriors, as Dr. Mike reminds us, are the ones whose strength is anchored in compassion, the ones who can say, I bought this, when they get it wrong, and who fight just as hard for the people under their care as they do for any mission or metric. I'm aware that for many of you, your relationship with the institution itself has felt like a kind of betrayal at times. Promises about housing, healthcare, operations tempo, or care after war haven't always matched your lived reality. Dr. Mike's framework doesn't ask you to deny that pain. It does invite you, wherever it's possible and safe, to 1, stay rooted in your own integrity, 2, protect yourself and your family with wise boundaries, and 3, refuse to let disillusionment steal your capacity for grace. So here's the question I want to leave with you as you think about your own life. Where, right now, are you being invited into contrition? And where are you being invited into grace? Maybe you're the one who did the wounding, and it's time to stop defending and start owning. Maybe you're the wounded one, and the work is learning how to protect yourself without turning your heart into stone. Maybe it's a marriage, a friendship, a family holiday, or even your relationship with a community or institution. Whatever it is, peace doesn't just happen. It's shaped by 1,000 quiet decisions to tell the truth, to stay grounded, and to move, even slowly, toward repair where repair is possible. If this conversation stirred something in you, I would love to hear your story. Record a short voice memo about a moment when you faced conflict and had to choose between defensiveness and contrition, or between bitterness and grace, and send it to restored@CoreyWeathers.com. Your story may be part of a future episode, and it may be exactly what someone else needs to hear to keep going. I'm Corey Weathers, and this is Restored, stories of conflict, healing, and peace. Thanks for listening.